Welcome! You're listening to the Uncharted Lancaster podcast, where we explore the hidden histories, forgotten places, and long-buried secrets of Lancaster County. Using modern digital storytelling tools, each episode brings a new piece of local lore to life, revealing the strange, the surprising, and the stories history left behind. Let's begin.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take a monumental stack of history, research, and fascinating documents and compress it down into the vital knowledge you need to be the most informed person in the room.
Today, we are focusing our lens on a figure that history has, frankly, done a disservice to.
A huge disservice. Primarily because his greatest successes happened during the darkest, most confusing hours of the American Revolution.
Exactly. We're talking about a man who was an immigrant from Ireland, a trained physician, a powerful politician, a highly effective land speculator, and arguably one of the most crucial battlefield commanders of the war.
And yet, for the average person, his name is just not there. We are diving deep into the sprawling, contradictory life of General Edward Hand.
You know, Hand wasn't just a soldier. He achieved the highest ranks in the Continental Army, retiring as a major general.
And he served as the very last adjutant general of the Continental Army under George Washington himself.
Right. But his biography, it shows us that the revolution was fought and won by this complex network of professionals, entrepreneurs, and political operatives who had to navigate all these conflicting ideals of the founding era.
He was a foundational piece of the early American puzzle, especially when you look at the growing frontier areas of Pennsylvania.
Our sources for this dive, which include historical excerpts, detailed biographical notes, and a lot of archival information from the historic Rockford Foundation, they all seem to converge on one powerful conclusion.
That Edward Hand is one of the most unsung Patriot military heroes of the entire conflict.
Our mission today is kind of twofold. First, we really need to uncover the pivotal, often overlooked role Hand played, particularly during those transformative 10 crucial days of the winter campaign of 1776-1777.
A time when his actions, and this is not an exaggeration, quite literally saved Washington's army.
And second, we have to examine the uncomfortable dualities of his life. How did this celebrated military genius transition so seamlessly into a respected civilian, a politician, a powerful landowner in Lancaster, Pennsylvania?
All while participating fully in the practice of human enslavement.
Mm-hmm. And that leads to the big question this deep dive really aims to answer. It's a question that connects his story directly to our modern understanding of that whole era.
Which is?
What did the story of Edward Hand tell us about the complex social and political landscape of the early American Republic? Especially when we look beyond the glossy narratives of coastal hubs like Boston and Philadelphia.
And instead examine life in influential yet geographically distinct frontier towns like Lancaster.
Exactly. His biography isn't just some historical footnote. It's a detailed microcosm of the deep contradictions that were just inherent in the founding generation's pursuit of liberty.
Okay, let's unpack this biography. We should probably start across the Atlantic, where the foundation of his revolutionary fervor was really laid.
Right. He wasn't born here. Hand was born on December 31st, 1744, in Clydach, which was then part of Kings County, Ireland.
What we now call County Offaly.
Precisely. We know his father was John Hand. And by all accounts, his upbringing was modest, but his ambition was clearly not. It led him to Dublin to pursue a profession.
And that profession was medicine.
His career path started in medicine, yeah. He studied at Trinity College, Dublin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the records here are a little curious.
How so?
Our sources note there is no formal record of his having matriculated.
Meaning he might not have actually completed a full degree program?
He may not have, but he certainly received enough practical training to earn a medical certificate. The key, though, I think, lies in the economic and professional pressures he was facing at the time.
And this is where his decisiveness, which we'll see later on the battlefield, starts to show itself. For an ambitious, aspiring physician in 18th century Ireland, there were two main paths to legitimacy.
The first was the traditional route,
Mm-hmm.
a long, often grueling 5-year apprenticeship with a practicing Dublin physician or surgeon.
Which was costly. And slow.
Very slow. And then there was the second route, the one Hand opted for in 1767.
Military service.
Military service. He enlisted as a surgeon's mate in the 18th, or the Royal Irish Regiment of Foot. This was a very calculated move.
Why calculated?
Because by joining the military, he completely bypassed that 5-year civilian apprenticeship.
So he gets immediate professional employment, gains experience, and gets a steady income, all without that long wait.
It was a fast-track strategy, perfect for a young man with a lot of ambition, but maybe not a lot of immediate capital.
And of course, this choice physically relocates him. It's what sets the stage for his entire American life.
Right. He sailed from Cobb in Cork in May 1767 and arrived in Philadelphia that July. And his unit wasn't sent to some comfortable urban center.
No, they were dispatched straight to the sprawling, rugged American frontier.
He spent the next 7 years primarily at Fort Pitt, which is located strategically at the forks of the Ohio River.
The gateway to the American interior, modern-day Pittsburgh.
Exactly. He started as a surgeon's mate, but his career pretty quickly became more administrative and logistical. He was commissioned as an ensign in 1772 and served as a supply officer.
A role that would have demanded he understand the movement of goods, people, and capital across these vast, difficult distances.
And here's where the military man starts to reveal this incredibly keen entrepreneurial instinct. It's a hallmark of so many of the successful founders, you know.
He didn't just passively do his duties.
Not at all. Our sources stress that he thrived as a merchant along the Ohio River. He was moving goods, making connections, and crucially, he was making lucrative land deals all along the river.
Those land deals were absolutely pivotal to his financial future, weren't they?
Oh, completely. I mean, the vast fertile lands of the Ohio Valley were seen as the future wealth of the entire continent.
So by understanding the logistics and having access to inside information about where settlements were likely to spring up,
he was able to engage in speculation that provided him with a really substantial financial cushion. He wasn't just earning a military wage, he was building a genuine fortune in property.
So when he finally decides to leave the British military, he's not doing it out of desperation. He's doing it from a position of real financial strength.
A huge position of strength. In 1774, he returned to Philadelphia, resigned, and sold his commission for a hefty 400 pounds.
And to put that in perspective for you, that was a significant sum back then. It represented years of wages for a skilled laborer. It was enough to comfortably set up a civilian professional practice and secure his initial elite standing.
But the move, it wasn't purely financial. It was deeply political.
He became disillusioned.
Profoundly disillusioned with British colonial policy in America. And it wasn't just abstract philosophy for him. He viewed the Crown's heavy-handedness through the direct lens of Irish history.
That's a huge psychological shift, though. To go from serving the crown to leading a rebellion against it, was it that Irish identity that was the main driver?
I think both were intertwined, but the political resentment really provided the fuel. Hand saw parallels everywhere.
The restrictions the British government placed on colonial trade and governance here.
Things like the Stamp Act or restrictions on westward expansion, they reminded him of generations of oppression that had been visited upon Ireland.
Can you elaborate on some of those specific parallels? I mean, what historical actions was Hand likely recalling that made the American cause resonate so deeply with him?
Certainly. I mean, historically, the English government imposed crippling restrictions on Ireland, often designed to economically suppress the country and maintain English dominance.
For instance, they restricted Irish trade with other English colonies.
They did, and they severely limited the export of Irish wool, which is a major economic driver. And they often imposed religious exclusions. Hand was acutely aware of policies that forced Presbyterians, like many of the Scots-Irish immigrants, to pay tithes to the Anglican Church of England.
While actively excluding Catholics and others from civil service and military positions.
Exactly. It bred this intense generational resentment of edicts from London.
So when those of Irish descent looked at the American colonies chafing under taxation without representation, they felt this visceral connection to the cause.
They absolutely did. And this context is so crucial because it explains why so many Irish and Scots-Irish immigrants shared this resentment and why they constituted such a massive, significant presence in Washington's Continental Army.
And Hand was firmly rooted in this demographic. He makes a clean break and sets up his civilian life in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in 1774.
His integration into Lancaster was immediate and brilliant. Within a year, in 1775, he marries Catherine Ewing, known as Kitty.
And she was the niece of Jasper Yates,
who was not just a prominent attorney, but later became a justice of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania.
So this marriage wasn't just personal, it was incredibly strategic.
Oh, it instantly rooted Hand into the community's highest social and political circles. Yates became his crucial political mentor, essentially fast-tracking this Irish immigrant right into the local elite structure.
And he leveraged that network immediately. He didn't wait around for the political dispute to escalate.
Not at all. Even before the Declaration of Independence, this physician-turned-speculator jumps right back into military organization. He helped form the local militia unit known as the Lancaster County Associators.
And he became deeply active in the growing Freemasonry Lodge in town.
Another crucial network for civic and political leadership. By the summer of 1775, Edward Hand was fully committed and ready to trade the comfort of his new life for the chaos of war.
So the moment the revolution ignites, Hand isn't just ready to fight, he is ready to lead a very distinct, very revolutionary kind of force.
He enters the Continental Army in July 1775 as a lieutenant colonel in the 1st Pennsylvania Regiment. He's quickly promoted to colonel in 1776 and takes command.
But this regiment was much more than just standard infantry.
Oh yeah, it was known as the 1st Battalion of Pennsylvania Riflemen.
And the significance of this unit lies squarely in the weapon they carried and the tactics they perfected.
They introduced a distinctly American-made technology to the battlefield, the long rifle. This was a profound deviation from the standard European infantry weapon, the smoothbore musket.
Let's talk about that long rifle for a minute. What made it such a tactical game changer compared to, say, the Brown Bess or other standard muskets the British and Hessians were using?
It was all about precision and range. The long rifle's barrel was engineered specifically for accuracy. It featured internal grooves, what we call rifling, etched into the metal.
7 or 8 of them, according to period descriptions.
Right. And when the ball was forced down the barrel, these grooves made it spin rapidly on its axis. And that spin provided incredible stability in flight.
And the result of that?
The result was that, while a typical smoothbore musket was largely ineffective or inaccurate beyond maybe 80 yards, the long rifle was consistently accurate at 200 yards.
And in the hands of a skilled marksman, it could even threaten targets at 300 yards.
Which gave Hand's men a massive, decisive advantage on the battlefield. It transformed them into, basically, early snipers and highly effective skirmishers.
They could operate well outside the effective range of British fire, picking off officers, artillery crew, key personnel.
The psychological impact on the British was immense. I mean, you have to imagine marching in a disciplined line, knowing an unseen enemy 3 times further away than your own gun can shoot, is targeting your command structure.
The reputation of these men definitely preceded them. When they arrived to join Washington outside Boston in August 1775,
The very first detachment from outside New England.
they caused an immediate stir.
They did. A Continental Army surgeon, Dr. James Thatcher, he wrote about their arrival. He described them as remarkably stout and hardy men, many of them exceeding 6 feet in height.
And he detailed their astounding prowess in a pretty famous description, right?
He did. He wrote, and I'm quoting here, at a review, a company of them, while on a quick advance, fire their balls into objects of 7 inches diameter at the distance of 250 yards.
Wow. That isn't just accuracy, that's consistency under pressure.
It meant they could instantly turn any engagement, making enemy officers who exposed themselves to view incredibly vulnerable. The British learned very quickly to prioritize targeting men in rifle shirts.
And the regiment had this strong, distinct identity that really played into this fierce reputation.
They wore white frocks or rifle shirts, which was a kind of camouflage but also a statement of non-uniformed resistance. And Hand himself ordered a specific silk standard for the regiment.
Deep green, featuring a tiger partly enclosed by nets, struggling against a hunter with a spear.
And their Latin motto, displayed on a crimson field, spoke volumes about their fighting spirit,
Domare nolo.
which translates roughly to refusing to yield or be subdued.
And they lived up to that motto almost immediately, securing Hand's place as an indispensable commander during the desperate delaying actions of the New York campaign in late 1776.
This brings us to the first incredible moment that really defines Hand as a field commander. The defense of Throg's Neck in October 1776.
Okay, set the scene for us. Washington's army was trying to escape Major General William Howe's trap in Manhattan.
Right. And Howe was attempting to land 4,000 troops at Throg's Neck, which is this small peninsula above the island, hoping to cut off the retreat.
And Hand's role there was just brilliant in its simplicity and lethality.
Under orders, he led a small detachment of riflemen who immediately tore up the planks of the bridge connecting Throg's Neck to the mainland.
Which effectively turned the area into an island, only connected by marshy ground.
Then, with only about 25 patriots, yes, just 25 riflemen, they concealed themselves behind a long pile of cordwood near the western end, and they waited.
So when the 4,000 Royal troops tried to advance,
Dan's small force just unleashed that deadly, harassing rifle fire. The British were unable to effectively return fire because of the superior range of the American rifles and the difficult terrain.
the resistance was so stubborn, so frustrating, that the British commander was forced to abandon the objective entirely.
He had to seek another landing site at Pell's Point days later. The delay was absolutely critical.
As historian Christopher Ward noted, 25 American riflemen behind a woodpile temporarily stopped the advance of the main British army.
And that bought Washington the crucial time he needed to move his forces north to White Plains and avoid complete annihilation.
But if Throg's Neck was crucial, his true defining moment, the act that many historians argue saved the revolution itself, came a couple months later.
During the 10 crucial days of that winter campaign, right after Washington's surprise victory at the First Battle of Trenton on December 26th.
So Washington knew that Lieutenant General Cornwallis was marching down from Princeton with a formidable column.
The cream of the British and Hessian forces.
And his goal was to annihilate the exposed Continental Army, which was arrayed behind the Assunpink Creek at Trenton.
Washington desperately needed time to prepare his defensive line and plan his next move.
And that time, that priceless time, was bought by Edward Hand.
It was. By a stroke of luck, or fate, as some sources put it, Hand found himself in command of about 1,000 men deployed forward to disrupt this massive enemy advance.
This forward unit, which included his 1st Pennsylvania and the German Continental Regiment, was initially under the nominal command of a French volunteer.
General Fermoy.
Right. So the morning of January 2, 1777, the action begins. Cornwallis's vanguard, primarily composed of Hessian Jaegers.
Elite light infantry and riflemen.
They began running into Hand's scattered resistance.
And this wasn't a static line. This was the beginning of a magnificent day-long series of running battles, utilizing the terrain absolutely perfectly. The initial resistance started at 8 Mile Run, now known as Shippetoken Creek.
Hand's riflemen would fire, force the British to deploy their main force, and then what?
And then they'd withdraw under fire, only to reappear a mile or two down the road to do it all over again.
And then we get to the crisis point at Big Shippetoken Creek,
where General Fermoy, the overall commander of the forward troops, suddenly fled toward Trenton.
possibly due to intoxication or just sheer panic.
We're not sure. But Hand, being the next senior officer present, immediately took command of the roughly 1,000 men.
And that, as you noted, may have been the best possible thing for the Patriot cause.
Oh, absolutely. Hand was determined, in his own words, to waste as much time as possible for the enemy at this point. This wasn't just fighting. This was a calculated, tactical withdrawal, and it was brilliantly executed.
Every minute he delayed Cornwallis was a minute Washington gained.
Exactly. Gain to fortify his lines or to enact his secret flanking maneuver.
This required a level of discipline and maneuverability that was just incredibly rare in the Continental Army at that point in the war. How did he manage to hold off a force so vastly superior in number and training?
He used every tactical means available. As Cornwallis's main forces approached the various creek crossings, Hand's riflemen, operating from wooded cover, would unleash this deadly focused fire.
Often targeting the enemy vanguard and throwing the massive main body into confusion.
He mixed irregular warfare ambushes from concealed positions with disciplined regimented cannon fire and infantry maneuvers. He forced Cornwallis to constantly halt, array his forces, prepare for a major assault.
Only to find the Americans had melted away again.
Sources map out this slow, determined withdrawal across the landscape of New Jersey. Specific locations mark the retreat. 5 Mile Run, Big Shippetoken Creek.
And finally, a deep ravine called Stockton Hollow, about half a mile north of Trenton.
And at Stockton Hollow, Hand skirmishers made their final, desperate stand. The situation was so dire and the delay so crucial that Washington himself rode out from Trenton.
Accompanied by his key generals, Nathaniel Greene and Henry Knox.
To personally encourage the resistance, Washington thanked Hand's defenders for their efforts and stressed the importance of delaying the enemy until nightfall, ensuring they didn't lose their precious artillery pieces.
And that small, outnumbered force, outnumbered by what, 7 or 8 to 1?
Potentially, yes. They managed to hold off Cornwallis for most of the afternoon until about 3 p.m. Hand and his men only fully retreated into Trenton as daylight was beginning to fade.
And the outcome was that the entire battle was paused.
It was. Cornwallis, confident that he had Washington trapped against the Delaware River, decided to wait for morning to execute the final assault. He famously said, We'll bag the old fox in the morning.
But Hand's action had guaranteed that darkness would fall before Cornwallis could array his forces for a full-scale assault on the Assunpink Creek defenses.
And of course, under the cover of that darkness, Washington executed his genius flanking maneuver. He quietly vacated his position and marched around the enemy's left flank to Princeton.
Securing the final victory of the winter campaign the next day, Hand's day-long delaying action was the tactical linchpin that made the entire maneuver possible.
It prevented the destruction of the Continental Army, and it reversed the military momentum of the entire war. That high praise you mentioned earlier, one could say the weather was guided by the hand of fate and the defenders by the hand of Pennsylvania, is entirely justified.
After demonstrating this brilliance as a tactician of light infantry, Hand earned a well-deserved promotion to brigadier general in March 1777.
But his next assignment took him far from the dense battlefields of New Jersey and back into the challenging, complex world of the western frontier, specifically commanding Fort Pitt once more.
And here, the nature of the conflict changed completely for him.
Entirely. He wasn't fighting organized British or Hessian regiments anymore. He was now managing a vast, shifting front against hostile Native American tribes and loyalists. This transition really exposed the massive operational difficulties of holding the West.
The primary struggle was logistical and manpower related, right?
Absolutely. Fort Pitt was geographically isolated. Supply lines were tenuous and long. Hand found himself chronically under strength, reliant on poorly trained, often unwilling local militia to secure this expansive, dangerous frontier.
He wrote to Washington expressing serious concerns.
He did. He advised the commander-in-chief that the Western Indians are united against us.
And what's fascinating is his lament regarding the local population. He complained about the coldness of neighboring inhabitants who were unwilling to provide support or militia duty.
Washington responded sympathetically. He understood the impossible situation, replying, "I am sorry your force is not more adequate to the uses you have for it, and that such coldness appears in the neighboring inhabitants."
As to preclude the assistance you had a right to expect from them. The lack of consistent local support meant Hand just could not adequately secure the territory,
which led to constant raiding and instability. And this challenging, under-resourced environment led directly to the major moral controversy of Hand's military career.
The expedition that became derisively known as the Squaw Campaign.
In early 1778, Hand led an expedition into Ohio country. The aim was to capture a British supply depot on the Cuyahoga River, a magazine used to supply allied Native American nations like the Wyandot and Shawnee.
But the operation was an operational failure. It failed to achieve its objective.
And the moral consequences were devastating. Hand's militiamen, either through malice or incompetence, failed completely to distinguish between neutral and hostile Native American groups.
They attacked the neutral Lenape village of Kuskuski.
Yes, and the result was the tragic and senseless killing of the mother, the brother, and a child of Chief Apokin, who was known as Captain Pipe.
This incident was a disaster for Patriot diplomacy on the frontier.
A total disaster. It severely damaged relations with neutral groups, sparked renewed hostilities across the vast frontier, and led directly to Hand's recall in August 1778.
So we see this intense duality of the man. A tactical genius on the New Jersey road, capable of saving the entire Continental Army, but a commander struggling and ultimately failing both operationally and ethically to manage the complex, brutal dynamics of frontier warfare.
His failure here had cascading negative consequences for years of subsequent campaigning.
Despite the failure at Fort Pitt, though, Hand's experience commanding light infantry and his knowledge of the western terrain were still highly valued by Washington.
Planning for a massive campaign against the Iroquois Confederacy was already underway, and Hand was a natural fit.
This was the massive Sullivan-Clinton-Iroquois expedition of 1779 through New York, intended to break the power of the Iroquois nations allied with the British.
And commanded the 3rd Brigade, which was specifically designated as the Light Corps of the Army. It formed its fast-moving vanguard. This corps was composed of riflemen and artillery.
His task was to scout ahead, secure crossings, and engage the enemy first. Exactly the kind of maneuver warfare he excelled at.
And the sources indicate he played a major role in the success of that campaign, which methodically devastated the Iroquois settlements and crop fields. It effectively removed them as a major military threat for the remainder of the war.
By the close of the year, Hand, still only 35, was the youngest of the brigadiers. He'd proved himself indispensable in both set-piece battles and light infantry maneuvers.
His final and arguably most influential wartime role was administrative. and it really reflects the immense trust Washington had in him.
After serving on important military boards, including the one that rendered a verdict on the captured British spy Major John Andre.
He was appointed Adjutant General of the Continental Army by Congress in January 1781.
What exactly did the Adjutant General do, and why was Hand, a combat field officer, given this desk job?
This was far more than a desk job. It was the nerve center of the entire Army. Hand was the chief administrative officer, responsible for the engine of command.
This included the essential tasks of transmission of general orders across the sprawling army.
Personnel administration, keeping track of who was where security matters, supervision of outposts. The position required immense organizational skills, discretion, and crucially, the implicit trust of the commander-in-chief.
And Hand was the final man to hold that position during the war.
He was, and this role took Hand directly to the final triumphant siege of Yorktown.
He traveled with Washington to Virginia, helping to prepare the complicated siege plans.
And he was personally tasked with keeping track of all the statistics, including casualty reports and troop strength. His importance is really highlighted by the fact that when General Cornwallis's force officially capitulated in October 1781.
Hand accompanied Washington and the French commander, the Comte de Rochambeau, as they rode out to receive the official surrender document.
After the peace treaty, Hand resigned from active duty in November 1783. He had received a promotion by brevet to Major General in September of that year in recognition of his long and distinguished service.
What exactly is a brevet promotion?
It's a technical distinction, but it's worth noting. It meant he held the rank for prestige and seniority, but it did not come with a corresponding increase in pay or permanent command authority. Nevertheless, it was a high honor.
It underscored the respect Washington held for him.
Absolutely. Washington's farewell was extremely warm. He wrote to Hand expressing, "My entire approbation for your public conduct, particularly in the execution of the important duties of Adjutant General."
And conveying how much reason I have had to be satisfied with the great zeal, attention, and ability manifested by you.
That's high praise from a man who rarely minced words.
With the war won and his military honor secured, Hand returns to Lancaster and seamlessly transitions back into civilian life. And he does something genuinely astonishing.
He resumes his medical practice,
which feels like a footnote compared to the combat and administrative pressures he had just endured for 8 years.
It speaks to his underlying professionalism, doesn't it? He wasn't just a soldier. He had a legitimate, valuable profession to return to. But more importantly, he was immediately recognized as a member of the new, powerful American elite.
How was this recognition formalized?
He was an original member of the Society of the Cincinnati, an exclusive and pretty controversial society of Continental Army officers.
For our listener, maybe explain the significance and structure of the Society of the Cincinnati.
Sure. The society was founded in 1783. It was intended to preserve the friendships forged during the Revolution, an advocate for the rights of the veterans.
But it was controversial because it was exclusive.
Very. Membership was generally limited to officers who served honorably for 3 years, and crucially, membership was hereditary, passing down to the eldest son.
Critics at the time, including some anti-Federalists, feared it was the start of an American aristocracy or a military elite trying to seize political control.
Right. But Hand was clearly in the inner circle. His membership card was personally signed by George Washington, who was the Society's first President General. This firmly cemented his place in the top echelon of the new republic.
And that status paved the way for a remarkably successful and robust political career.
He established himself immediately as a staunch Federalist, the party of Washington and Hamilton, which advocated for a strong central government.
And importantly, promoted policies that favored stability, trade, and Western expansion, things Hand was very familiar with.
His political trajectory in the 1780s and 90s was relentless. He held multiple critical roles that show his influence both locally and nationally. He was a member of the Congress of the Confederation from 1784 to 1785.
Which was a pivotal time for the young nation, operating under the Articles of Confederation before the Constitution was ratified.
Serving in that body gave Hand crucial national experience and a deep understanding of the need for stronger federal governance. It just reinforced his Federalist alignment. After that, he served in the Pennsylvania Assembly from 1785 to 1786.
But perhaps his most foundational political contribution at the state level was serving as a delegate to the convention for the 1790 Pennsylvania Constitution.
Absolutely. The 1790 Constitution was a major restructuring for Pennsylvania. It replaced the highly democratic and often unstable Constitution of 1776 with one that was much more moderate.
It established a powerful governor and a bicameral legislature, aligning the state more closely with the new federal model.
And Hand's role as a delegate meant he was instrumental in shaping the fundamental legal and governmental structure of one of the largest and most important states in the Union.
And he didn't neglect local affairs either. He served as Chief Burgess of Lancaster,
which was the highest elected municipal position at the time, sort of like a mayor. He even served as a presidential elector.
This extensive public service shows how critical his standing was. He wasn't just a figurehead. He transitioned from a battlefield hero to a respected state and national political operative without missing a beat.
And beyond his political power, he was a key figure in civic benevolence and education. He was a foundational benefactor of Franklin College,
the institution that later became Franklin and Marshall College. He served actively on the board of trustees.
And this appears to be a commitment that extended beyond his own life, too. Our sources confirm that 3 of his daughters eventually attended the school, which shows a deep belief in the importance of post-secondary education in the new republic.
If we're looking for a concrete example of his civic character, there's a really powerful anecdote from 1793.
The yellow fever epidemic.
That summer, Philadelphia, which was the nation's capital at the time, suffered a devastating yellow fever epidemic. The disease killed about 5,000 inhabitants, paralyzing the government and society.
The accounts of the suffering, the flight of thousands from the city, the chaos, the lack of medical care, they were widespread.
So what did Hand and the Lancaster community do?
They stepped up with immense generosity and logistical sophistication, especially when you consider the constraints of 18th century communication and transportation.
Hand and other Lancaster residents organized a massive coordinated relief effort. They appealed for contributions from the surrounding agricultural community.
And our sources detail the scale of it. The community collected several hundred barrels of flour, over $1,000 in cash, which was a huge amount for the time, and numerous packages of clothing,
which were then delivered to the victims and relief organizations in Philadelphia.
It illustrates a crucial, often forgotten role of the revolutionary elite. They were the organizational infrastructure that coordinated large-scale humanitarian aid in a time of national crisis.
It wasn't just the federal government that responded. It was these local networks established by men like Hand.
All of this civic activity occurred while he was building his family estate, Rockford. He began purchasing land along the Conestoga River, just southeast of Lancaster, starting in 1785, with 160 acres.
And he added another 17 acres in 1792, totaling 177 acres. This land was the foundation of his final great success.
This investment really solidified his transition from frontier speculator to landed gentry. The Georgian-style brick mansion at Rockford was completed in 1794.
It was his family home, where he lived with Kitty and their 7 children until his death in 1802. Kitty lived there until 1805.
It really was the culmination of his life, a life marked by military service, political influence, and deep local establishment.
Historic Rockford is vital today, not just because it was General Hand's home, but because of its significant place in architectural history and its incredible preservation.
Indeed. It is widely regarded by preservationists as one of the most important examples of Georgian domestic architecture surviving in Pennsylvania.
And crucially, it is the most intact building predating 1800 in all of Lancaster County.
What defines that Georgian style, and why is this particular example so important in the Pennsylvania context?
Georgian architecture, named for the British monarchs, reflected this desire for symmetry, balance, and classical proportion. Rockford is a perfect example.
It's a substantial 4-floor structure built of brick, conforming precisely to the classic Georgian plan of a center hall, flanked by 4 perfectly balanced corner rooms on each floor.
This style projected stability, wealth, and an adherence to European classical tastes.
Its importance in Pennsylvania is really twofold. First, it demonstrates the sophistication of the gentry in this region, which was often viewed as a rugged frontier.
And second, the house was saved from destruction in 1958 by the Junior League of Lancaster. They recognized its unique historical value and initiated a massive restoration effort.
It has been meticulously restored and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Today, it operates as a historic house museum run by the Rockford Foundation.
And the museum is furnished with incredible care. The rooms are set up to reflect the exact inventory of the house at the time of Hand's death in 1802.
Which provides visitors with a highly accurate snapshot, not just of the architecture, but of the material culture and the lived experience of the early American elite between 1794 and 1805.
Now, before we discuss the museum's collections, we have to tackle one of the most difficult yet necessary aspects of the historical context surrounding the property.
And that begins with the historical terminology used to describe it.
Right. Our sources state that contemporary records referred to Rockford as both a farm and a plantation.
This is a point where historical nuance is absolutely essential for a modern audience, particularly when we're dealing with Pennsylvania history.
We have to first acknowledge the emotional weight and modern definition of the word plantation, a definition overwhelmingly tied to large-scale chattel slavery and cash crop economies, especially in the southern states.
Right. But we are talking about late 18th century Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And the sources clarify that in this specific time and place, the word plantation often functions simply as an archaic term for land under cultivation or farm.
So it was a descriptor of acreage and activity, not necessarily the scale or nature of the labor force as we understand it today.
Exactly. But, and this is the crucial point, that necessary linguistic distinction doesn't erase the fact that the institution of slavery was absolutely a reality on this property and throughout Lancaster County.
No, not at all. Slavery was legal in all 13 original states, including Pennsylvania, which, though it passed the Gradual Abolition Act of 1780, was still a slaveholding state well into the 19th century.
And the documents confirm, unequivocally, that Edward Hand was an enslaver. He owned several people throughout his life.
Which forces us to confront the profound moral contradictions that allowed a man indispensable to the cause of liberty to simultaneously benefit from the brutality of human enslavement.
We even have specific, painful details about the enslaved individuals who served the Hand family, particularly during the turbulent war years when Edward Hand was constantly away on campaign.
Yes, the records provide names, which is so vital for restoring their humanity. Catherine Hand, or Kitty, was served by enslaved persons of African descent while Hand was at war.
These included a woman named Sue, a girl named Bet, and a boy named Bob.
It's a heartbreaking detail that the boy, Bob, is mentioned in the sources as being entrusted to convey goods and even money over long distances between General Hand at the front lines and Kitty back in Lancaster.
The irony is inescapable, isn't it? A person denied their own freedom was trusted completely with the physical logistics and financial security of his enslaver's family.
The documents indicate that the enslaved people owned by the Hands were generally used for non-agriculture purposes,
which suggests domestic work, household services, personal attendance, and possibly skilled labor related to the general's affairs, rather than being focused on large-scale field work typical of the South.
Domestic enslavement in Pennsylvania was different in scale, but no less brutal in its denial of freedom.
The records become a little clearer once the family is settled at Rockford. The 1800 U.S. Census for Hand's household totaled 14 members.
And that count would likely include his wife and 7 children, a secretary, possibly a free white laborer, and crucially, a record of 1 enslaved person.
An individual named Frank.
Frank, described as a person of African descent and a farmhand, underlines the continuation of the practice even as the 19th century was approaching, and Pennsylvania's gradual abolition was supposedly taking effect.
And Frank's story, sadly, ends on a note of desperation. He was the person who escaped from Rockford shortly before Hand's death in 1802.
After Hand's death, Catherine Hand continued to live at Rockford, and Lancaster County tax records confirm she still enslaved 1 unnamed person of African descent until her own death in 1805.
So the story of Rockford today isn't just a story of Georgian elegance and revolutionary triumph. It's a site that, through its detailed preservation, demands an honest confrontation with the full, contradictory reality of 18th century American life.
The comfort and wealth of the elite, symbolized by that beautiful mansion, were often supported by the forced labor of enslaved people like Sue, Bet, Bob, and Frank.
And yet simultaneously, the site celebrates the decorative and material culture of the era that Hand helped usher in.
The John J. Snyder Jr. Gallery.
Housed in the beautifully restored 18th century bank barn on the property. It showcases an exceptional collection of Lancaster County decorative arts from the Revolutionary War and early American Republic eras, roughly 1760 to 1820.
And this collection is important because Lancaster was a major center of American craftsmanship. It displays the local skill and wealth tall case clocks, furniture, silver, ceramics, paintings.
Things that would have graced homes like Rockford. And here's a direct connection back to Hand's military genius. The gallery also features the Kaufman collection of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania long rifles.
It places the high craftsmanship of the post-war planter elite, directly alongside the deadly accuracy of the weapon that defined Hand's early career and arguably saved Washington's army.
It's a full picture of the society.
Yeah.
Hand inhabited, its elegance, its ingenuity, and its moral compromises.
Hand himself did not enjoy his post-war success for very long. He died at Rock Ford on September 3rd, 1802, at the relatively young age of 57.
And the cause of death remains frustratingly unclear in the medical records, which is a significant gap for a physician.
Records suggest suspected typhoid, dysentery, or pneumonia. Some less reliable sources cite cholera.
But researchers have pointed out there is no evidence that Lancaster County was suffering from a cholera epidemic in 1802.
He was buried at St. James's Episcopal Cemetery in Lancaster, where he had served the community as a deacon. His life, while relatively short, was intensely consequential.
It spanned from a young Irish immigrant seeking a medical career to one of the most trusted generals and influential politicians in the new American Republic.
So, what does this all mean for us today? When we look back at the life of General Edward Hand, we see a trajectory defined by immense talent, sheer necessity, and profound contradiction.
He was an immigrant who used the structures of the British military to launch his career, only to become a ferocious opponent of that very crown.
And that opposition was fueled by a deeply ingrained resentment inherited from his Irish roots against London's overreach.
He was a trained medical man who found his true calling in combat. He demonstrated a brilliance for light infantry tactics during the 10 crucial days.
His disciplined, day-long delaying action on January 2nd, 1777, was, without hyperbole, indispensable to Washington. It prevented the destruction of the Continental Army and ensured the strategic success at Princeton.
And his elevation to adjutant general proves he was one of Washington's most trusted confidants and administrators for the remainder of the war.
And yet, that frontier command reveals the harsh, dark side of that necessity, the controversial and ultimately devastating Squaw Campaign.
It targeted neutral tribes and ignited further conflict, proving that his understanding of the complex political and ethical landscape in the West was fatally flawed.
Then he transitions seamlessly. He sheds the uniform for political office, leveraging his military reputation and familial ties to become a pillar of the Federalist elite in Pennsylvania.
And the establishment of Rock Ford, that magnificent Georgian mansion, epitomizes the success he achieved through land speculation and political influence.
The lasting importance of Rock Ford today is that it forces visitors to confront the full reality of this life. It allows us to view the elegance of the 18th century architecture, the sophisticated material culture, the acts of civic benevolence.
Like that incredible yellow fever relief effort.
While simultaneously understanding that this comfort, this foundation, was built and maintained within a society where the brutality of human enslavement was legal and practiced.
Even on his own property, with the labor of individuals like Sue, Bet, Bob, and Frank.
The legacy of Edward Hand compels us to engage in critical thinking about the meaning of founding. He achieved personal greatness in service to the ideals of political liberty and self-determination for some.
Ideals that, in his personal life and in the lives of many of his peers, did not extend to everyone residing under the roof of his beautiful home.
So we leave you with this final provocative thought. Edward Hand was literally indispensable to George Washington, helping prevent the collapse of the Continental Army during its darkest hours. Given the undeniable fact that his rise to prominence and his final wealth, like that of many influential founders, was facilitated by lucrative land deals and the uncompensated labor of enslaved people, does the widely used term unsung hero do justice to the true cost and immense complexity of his legacy?
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
We hope you feel thoroughly informed and perhaps a little challenged by the nuances of history. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Uncharted Lancaster podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating or review wherever you listen. It really helps more people discover the show. For more fascinating local history, visit unchartedlancaster.com. And if you'd like to go deeper, check out one of Adam Zern's books at unchartedlancaster.com/books. Until next time, keep exploring.